desde Las Vegas, Nevada. Iniciamos con el programa Hablando de bienes y raíces con Castillo y sus invitados. Comenzamos.
Good morning, Las Vegas. My name is JC Castillo. We're starting here your program, Real Estate Talk with JC Castillo and his guests. We're here live in the Lawyer's Title studio, and we are here today with two very, very great guests. There are two escrow officers that have worked with Lawyer's Title for a very long time, and the reason why we're doing this today is because we want to talk about the experiences that they've had in the past and how really, truly, the experience of an escrow officer will make a difference in a real estate transaction. So we're gonna go ahead and get started and say hello to my lovely ladies here. We're gonna go ahead and start with Miss Lorianne. Good morning, how are you?
Good morning, how are you?
I'm doing great. Miss Lakeisha, how are you?
Good morning, I'm doing great.
Great. So Lorianne, would you please give me your name, last name, how long you've been in the industry, and how long you've been here at Lawyer's Title?
My name is Lorianne Dixon. I am an escrow officer currently at our Southwest branch with Lawyer's Title. I have been in the business for almost 28 years, and I have been with Lawyer's Title almost 14 years.
Great. And Keisha, please?
Keisha Miller. I also work in the Southwest branch.
Mm-hmm.
I have been in the industry for 22 years, working on 23.
Right.
With Lawyer's Title now, working on 9 years.
Perfect. And I really appreciate the time that you guys are sitting here with us, because I know you guys are really busy, and luckily we're one of the few title companies that have escrow assistants. So while you guys are sitting here, your escrow staff is handling, the day-to-day operations, but it's really hard for you guys to get away from your desk. And I want the people to understand really what is it that you guys handle in a day-to-day transaction, right? So let's say I'm a real estate agent and I open escrow with, Lorianne. What is the process that you go through to make sure that that real estate transaction closes, please?
So when escrow is opened, I review the contract. I'll send out an opening email, and in that opening email, it's going to give the agents the escrow number. It's going to tell them a number of things that we're going to need for closing. One is going to be that whether they're representing the buyer or the seller, that we need their phone number, we need their email address. We have what is called a Start in Here portal that is sent out to the clients, and that's for us to obtain personal information that we don't want the agents to have.
Perfect.
So once we get that information, then we're able to contact the clients and let them know escrow's opened and what to watch for.
Perfect. And Keisha, I know that you do exactly the same thing that she does, but can you explain the reason why that portal is so important? Because we've had a lot of issues with, wire fraud and identity theft and everything. And a lot of the agents that I talk to, or, the feedback is, oh my God, this is a pain in the ass. But they don't realize that really is a protection for them to protect their consumer, right?
Correct. So the portal itself is pretty user friendly.
Okay.
There's 4 steps. Once you get the email, you access the email. It sends you a code to your phone for you to, further access.
Yeah.
And then you just go through the steps. And step 1, I'm going to put this out there because a lot of people are not aware.
Please.
In step 1, you have the option of depositing your earnest money through the portal. So you would basically make a check payable to Lawyer's Title Company.
Okay.
For the amount of the earnest money. And the system will prompt you to take a picture of the front and back of the check, and then you upload it directly through the portal. Now, a lot of people don't
they don't know
checks anymore.
Right, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
However, if you do, that is the way to go. Because you don't have to worry about, one, dealing with the wire instructions.
Correct.
Because it can be very stressful for an individual that's not familiar with a real estate transaction, one. And then when they see fraud all over the place, it's like, I don't know if I should, really be doing this, or am I doing the right thing? I find it very, very convenient, the app.
Lorianne, in your experience, we're dealing with people that have never dealt with, first of all, this kind of monies, right? And then second of all, they never dealt with this kind of process where, we need to wire money, we need to do this, we need to do that. It could be intimidating for a lot of the consumers, right?
It is very intimidating for a lot of consumers. One of the things that I stress to my agents is, look, when we call your buyers, we're going to walk them through the process so that at any point while they're in the transaction, they have questions on it, they can stop and call us.
Right.
Like she said, the mobile deposit is a great thing, and with the starting here, there's 4 different steps. So the first one is the mobile deposits. Then they're going to move on to answering some questions. And a lot of times they don't know the answers to the questions when they're in there, and they don't know what to do, and maybe it won't let them move forward.
Correct.
So I always stress, we're big on communication. Like, I would rather get 15 calls from your buyer or your seller than them to say, oh, I'll just do it.
Right.
Or I've spent so much time on trying to get this to work that I'll just do it. No, stop.
Right.
Call us. You don't do this every day where we do. You don't see the things that we see. And it's so important. And even agents calling me and saying, oh, just send them to me. Lenders, send me the wire instructions, I'll get it to them. No, absolutely not. We cannot. We've been doing this a long time, and we've seen a lot of things, and it doesn't work in their favor. So let us handle the transaction. Let us have the 15 million talks with your buyers and sellers. I mean, I'd rather do that than for their money to go into the hands of somebody else.
And Keisha, you said, we don't recommend to have the agents get involved in that transaction because we've seen a lot of things go south. And unfortunately, somebody has to be blamed for not making it happen. And you as a professional don't want to get involved in that aspect of, let me get involved with the wiring of the money, right?
No, stay clear.
Please, don't be honest. Be honest.
Stay clear of it because think about this. So if I send the wiring instructions to the agent,
yes,
right? And the hackers get a hold of the agent's email.
Correct.
Guess what?
I'm liable.
We are compromised.
Yes.
The entire company is compromised because of that one email that I sent to the agent. And I shouldn't have done that.
I didn't think about that, but you're right.
Well, and the thing is also is the agents are the number 1 target.
Yes.
For hackers.
Right.
Because they're sending different things back and forth with the buyers, with the sellers, so they're just sitting there waiting and watching. And one wrong thing, putting wire or earnest money in that subject line could trigger it.
Yeah, and that again is really important for the real estate professional to understand that Lawyer's Title has really spent millions of dollars because it's a nationwide company, millions of dollars to protect that one single transaction because we don't want to be in the news. We don't want to be in the aspect of, oh my God, we got hacked and now the whole system for us is down. Because you guys don't just deal with one transaction a month. You guys deal with a high quantity of transactions in a given month. Between you two, Keish, how many transactions do you close in a given month?
On average, between 20 and 25.
Lorianne?
Same.
Okay,
maybe
so
more depending,
Yeah.
right. So we have this 20 different transactions with 50 different people in each transaction if you really think about it, right? So we want to make sure that everybody's safe. So I think it's very important for the agents to understand that when you have that conversation with your consumers, with your buyers or your sellers, like, hey, if you're using Lawyer's Title, this is what's going to happen. If you have any questions, call escrow officers because they will be there to help you walk through it.
Absolutely.
Right? And we want to make sure that they understand that it's a positive thing for them because we're protecting their interest, right? Perfect. So now I'm going to put your experience to the test. All right? When you're doing a real estate transaction, 95% of the consumer, the buyer or seller, have no idea what escrow does. Can you explain, Lorianne, the first part of the escrow side? So the consumer and then Keish, from the opening all the way to when you talk to the lender, and then Keish, you'll finish the closing part because it's a long process, right? Yes. So Lorianne, would you please mind?
So the escrow process is opening escrow, and then processing the escrow, and then closing the escrow.
Uh-huh.
So in the opening phase, like I said, I send out an email that says that we need your buyer's contact information, we need their phone number, we need their email address. Our portal works off of both of those, so we have to have both of those for them to be able to access the portal.
Okay.
In the portal, there are a number of questions, depending if you're the buyer or the seller, what it's going to ask you.
Okay.
It's going to ask you if you have a spouse, it's going to ask you for social security numbers, it's going to ask you for date of birth. It's going to ask who your lender is if you're a buyer, do you know who your insurance company is? If you're a seller, it's going to ask for the same social, date of birth, but it's going to ask for payoff information. Are you married? Once they fill out all the information through the portal, then that's transmitted back to us.
Okay.
And once we get that information, it goes into our escrow file, and then we're going to order the preliminary title report. We're going to start ordering demands, depending on what's on the preliminary title report.
Okay.
There's payoffs, HOAs, liens, or judgments and stuff. And then once those demands come in, that's when we're going to start putting together our closing statements.
Okay.
And so forth. And then I know I can speak for myself, when we have everything in on the seller side of the transaction, then we'll send out a closing statement to the listing agent and saying, hey, please review the figures, you know, we're ready for the seller to sign, and we'll communicate back and forth with them. And then they'll come in and sign, and then of course the buyer, if they're obtaining a loan, then we'll coordinate with their lender. But I'll let you want to do the second half?
Yeah, and then so once we start coordinating with the lender, the lender gets clear to close. They provide us with the loan documents. From there, we schedule the buyer for signing. Once they sign, then we submit the signed documents to the lender for review. They review, fund the loan. Once we receive the lender funds and the buyer closing funds, then we can proceed with closing.
Okay.
At that time, we reach out to all parties in the transaction and ask them if they are ready to close.
Okay.
Once they give us the green light, then we're good to go.
Okay,
we
perfect.
Push the button and record.
Perfect. So let me throw a wrench into this whole scenario. What happens if one of the parties says no green light, there's a red light somewhere? Can we go ahead and still close?
No, we pause.
So you guys don't make decisions?
We do not. We take instruction.
We take written instruction.
Written instruction.
And also, you guys are not titled. Because a lot of the people out there get confused and say, oh, my escrow officer is also my title officer, or they handling title. That's a totally different department, right?
That is correct.
So you guys have to be trained not only on the finance part, on understanding the numbers, you know, the figures, like you said, both of you, you know, we're ordering demands from the HOA, and, you know, that could take a couple of days to get it.
A couple of weeks sometimes.
Okay.
10 days by law.
Okay, let's talk about it, because the contract says within 10 days you have to have the HOA information, but it doesn't happen, does it?
Well, if you're referring to the resale package,
Okay.
So typically that's ordered right up front.
Okay.
Right after the preliminary title comes in, then that can be ordered unless the agent orders it directly themselves.
Right.
And stuff.
But the demand?
Depending on when your closing is.
Okay.
So if you have a 30 or 45 day closing and the prelim comes in, then we can order the HOA documents as far as the demand statement and so forth. Because they have by law 10 days to get it, and their demands are typically good for 30 days.
Okay, so what happens if the transaction goes over the 30 days? Do we need to get an updated demand? And now we have to wait another, few days to get that updated demand?
So it depends.
I mean, again, let's be honest.
Let's just say it's recommended.
Yes.
Okay.
It is recommended.
Okay.
However, there are workarounds.
Okay, that's fair.
So,
That's fair. And again, we need to understand, we need to have the agents understand what literally you guys have to do when you guys are not have the right answer from, or they're taking their sweet time to get, demands and everything, because we have a schedule, right? I mean, there's there's a closing, there's an opening date, there's a closing date. What happens between the opening and closing? You guys do a lot of stuff that agents don't realize what you guys go through.
There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes.
And that's what I'm trying to have you guys kind of explain, so like the agents understand that when they call you and they're like, have you got loan docs? And you're like, no, I don't have loan docs. Well, the lender said they sent it out. That's a two different conversation, because it's not like you guys are sitting on loan docs just saying, I'm going to piss off this agent, right?
Well, I get a lot of calls where the agents will call me just last week where they'll say, the lender just called and they have the clear to close.
Yes.
And I'll say, that's great that they have the clear to close. However, we still have to do our part of it, and we have to balance with the lender. And they're like, oh, like it's a whole different thing that they didn't even realize that we have to do.
Exactly.
So the lender will say, yes, we have the clear to close, which is great, but we also have stuff behind the scenes that we have to do to ensure that when we send out that closing statement that we're balanced with the lender, and that we don't have any, like, we need additional funds, or this wasn't fully accurate because we didn't balance with the lender. So there are steps behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see that we have to do.
Right, and
it can take a little while to balance as well with the lender. It's not them just sending you their CD and you matching the figures.
Okay.
There's a whole lot of things that could go into play.
Okay, so take me through that process without being very specific with numbers or anything, but take me through the process of how we get that balancing. Because like I said, I talk to agents all the time. It's like, well, your title company really didn't want to close. I'm like, no, I mean, we want to close deals as much as you guys want. The problem is that sometimes the communication factor, because again, let's be honest, that lender is not only dealing with Lorianne and Keisha, they're dealing with 17 other escrow officers from many different companies from across the nation. Right. So it's kind of like you have to fall into place to be able to have that appointment with that funder and say, okay, let's talk about our deal. And sometimes we all wish that the deals were really quickly, that does A and B equal C, and you're like, yeah, but usually it doesn't, right? Keisha, you're shaking your head. Explain that process to me, please.
How about, I was just going to say that.
Please.
So how about, I'll use this for as a scenario.
Okay.
So the lender has sent me the CD. I'm working on balancing. The agents have provided me with addendums that the lender doesn't have.
Yeah.
They're not aware.
Okay.
I'll start with buyer's agent's going to credit their full commission.
Okay, great example.
Okay. I have it disclosed. I submitted to the lender on my closing statement, and they're going, wait a minute, hold up, no, we weren't aware of this.
Oh.
The buyer doesn't qualify. We can't allow the buyer to get a credit of $10,000 from the agent. He doesn't meet his minimum down payment. So now we have to go back and forth with those figures.
Right.
To balance to what the lender's requirements are for the minimum down payment.
So it's not A plus B equals C.
It is not.
No, there's sometimes last minute credits or I'm going to cover this for them that the lender's not aware of, and sometimes the lenders have addendums and we don't.
Okay.
We'll see their CD and we're like, where are they getting this $3,000 credit from the seller? Like, I don't have this addendum. So then you'll go to the lender and say, do you have this addendum? And they're like, oh yeah, let me send it over to you. So it's very important for agents to understand when you are doing your purchase contract and you have counteroffers, those need to come to us too. If you have addendums, if you have a post-possession, all those things need to come over to us as soon as they're signed, because we're plugging in figures on our closing statement this whole time. You know what I mean? I hate when we get down to the closing and you've sent out a closing statement and then they come back and say, well, where's the credit on here? My buyer's supposed to be getting the home warranty, credit from, the seller, and I'm like, oh, okay, I don't have that addendum.
Right.
So it's very important that anytime anything changes with the purchase contract, the counters, the addendums, that escrow gets a copy of that. We only work off of instruction. So you can't call me as an agent and say, oh, put a $3,000 credit on there from the seller, and that doesn't work. We gotta have written instructions,
Okay. So I totally understand why a lot of the agents think that you guys are mind readers, right? I totally understand why a lot of the agents sometimes we'll turn around and say, well, escrow didn't have this, but if you guys don't see it come through in a written format, you guys can't act on it. Right. I mean, if I come in and I'm the buyer's agent and say, hey, seller agreed to pay, even if it's as simple as the $695 home warranty, you guys just can't come in and say, oh, I'm going to take that money from the seller and put it in the buyer's credit, because you guys don't have nothing in writing. And I know Keisha is shaking her head, but how many conversations have you had with, and again, you know what, I don't mean to disrespect anybody, but those real estate agents that are really hard to get a hold of during the day, and now you're like, we're ready to fund, I have the funder on the phone, we're trying to get this deal settled down, and I can't get a hold of anybody, no transaction coordinator, no buyer's agent, to get that document that you need, and then literally they don't have it signed yet because they said, oh, we negotiated last night over the phone, but we haven't sent it out yet. What kind of time frame does that put you guys in the back end, right? I mean, do you understand the question?
Well, they're driving.
Okay.
They're driving. So if they delay it, that's on them, basically.
Okay, that's fair.
So what if we went off of what the agent was telling us and then say it was a $3,000 credit last minute?
Yes.
Something happened and the seller's like, well, I'll just credit him for closing costs for this, and we don't have that addendum, and we put it on the closing statement.
Okay.
And we close escrow, and then after we close, that seller calls and says, my proceeds aren't what I signed for.
Right.
Well, the agent said that you were given a $3,000 credit from
your proceeds.
Well, there was nothing in writing.
Right.
So guess what happens?
We're in trouble.
It falls on us.
We're in trouble.
Right. And I mean, we're audited,
Yeah.
We have audits and stuff, and we have to make sure that our files are compliant.
Correct.
And that we're following what the wishes are for the buyer and the seller, and keeping everybody in the transaction honest, and following what's in their purchase contract.
Right. So in all fairness, you guys assume the responsibility of the referee in a real estate transaction, right? I mean, you guys kind of have to have everybody in the same page, but also you guys are responsible for full transparency of the transaction. Mm-hmm. So if a buyer and a seller are, agreeing something where, the lender is not approving it, you guys have to be the ref that throws in that yellow flag and like, hey, hold on, there's a flag on the play.
Yes.
The lender cannot approve this, and now you guys are the bad guy.
Yes, and it happens quite a bit when you have a VA buyer that has to come in with a certain amount of funds and the seller's giving a credit.
Okay.
And maybe we can't credit the full seller credit because the buyer's not gonna come in with the amount of funds that they need to make up their 3.5% down payment. So when things like that happen, unfortunately, we're the ones, like if a transaction fee can't be paid or it's a non-allowable fee, then we're the ones that are going to the agent saying, hey, unfortunately, we're not able to, put this on the closing statement and so forth. We need to remove it per lender or whatever the situation is.
Right, and let's be honest, 90% of the transaction goes this way. But Lorianne, the seller agreed to pay for it. Why we can't use it? That's gonna destroy my deal. And Keisha's shaking her head like saying, we have these conversations all the time, right, Keisha?
Mm-hmm. All the time.
So how do you make the agent understand that?
Well, you don't.
I mean,
communication.
Like seriously, like you can communicate it all day long.
Right.
If it's something that they don't want to hear, they're not going to hear it.
Right.
However, it is something that has to be done. Like you can't put it on the back end.
Okay.
You can't try to, oh well, I don't want him to be upset, so I'm gonna just do it like this. That way, the seller gets what they want and the buyer gets what they want, and then we just don't. No.
Right.
It basically, I mean, not to sound harsh or anything.
No.
It is what it is.
Right.
At the end of the day,
it comes down to us having to also educate the agent, because maybe the agent doesn't understand. Look, my purchase agreement says $12,000 the seller's crediting. My buyer is only getting $10,000 of that. Where's this other $2,000 going?
Right.
Well, that money is staying with the seller because we don't have enough closing costs that equal up to the $12,000.
Oh,
So we can't just make up costs to cover that.
what?
So I know.
You can't
I know.
just
They
make
think,
up costs.
oh, we'll just give them, you know, 2,000 for this or 2,000 for that. Well, it doesn't always work that way. So I think it goes back to just educating your agents.
Right.
You know, and sometimes I refer them back to their buyer's lender. Maybe, you know, there's a way that the lender can explain it to them that maybe I'm not
So,
relaying.
Yeah.
You know.
so let me ask you a question. So if we have, like in the example you gave, we have $10,000 that are usable. There's 2,500 out there. I can't come in as a buyer's agent and say, well, you know what? Here's a cell phone bill, pay it.
No.
Here's a repair bill, pay it if it hasn't been done, right? I mean, there's no way that you could utilize those funds in a manner that is not being strategically set aside for. If it's closing costs, it's closing costs,
Correct.
right? And that's a conversation that a lot of the agents should be having with their lenders that they're not having, and they're sitting here arguing with you guys and saying, why are you guys not making this fit, right?
If it comes to the point where they're, you know, truly upset and I'm not explaining
Yeah.
or educating them, I refer them to the lender, because at the end of the day, we have to close based off the instructions that were given from the lender. We have to follow the lender's instructions. We have to follow what the lender's CD shows.
Right.
So I can't just give a $12,000 credit and the CD is only showing a $10,000 credit. You know.
Yeah.
So.
Very interesting, because a lot of the agents, right, they just see what's in front of them. They only look at the negotiation factor, but they don't really look and pay attention to the details of what the lender is saying, right? You guys can't make any decision on your own. You guys are just following instructions on the fact that the lender's saying these funds are for this, these funds are for that, and then the remainder we can't touch, send them back. And then the agent is not understanding that. Then we get to a position where they're literally arguing with you, and all they have to do is pick up the phone and say, hey, Mr. Lender, explain to me why this is not happening. Then they got to go back to their consumer and saying, hey, this is the reason why it's not happening. And then everything still flows the same way. Right. But unfortunately, there's a lot of agents out there that, you know, don't take that approach, right? They think that they're doing the right thing, but they're not understanding the details that are coming in. And I love one thing that you guys both said, that you guys only act upon written instructions. And I've done a lot of signings where I've seen the lender instructions, and it could be 3 to 5 pages long, right? You guys got to check off every single box that's in those lender instructions to make sure that you guys are in compliance, correct? Explain that to me, Keisha. How does that process go about you know, checking and make sure that everything is there, that you don't miss nothing, because that could create a huge issue.
It definitely could. However, because I've been doing it for so long, I'm kind of I already know.
You've seen it.
I'm very seasoned.
We know where to go with the instructions and what to look for
Okay.
and make sure, you know.
Yeah, and a lot of lenders are different.
Right.
However, it's pretty standard across the board. Like when you're dealing with closing instructions.
Correct.
From a lender.
Yeah.
Lorianne?
In the closing instructions, we're looking for endorsements. We're looking for what types of policies they want.
Okay.
Are we paying the next quarter taxes?
Ooh.
Because sometimes on their CD, it gets confusing because you have the third quarter that's due, but we're closing when the third quarter's due. So, you know, are they wanting us, what's on their CD, is that truly third quarter? Because a lot of times it just says 3 months.
Correct.
So then I refer back to their lender's instructions and say, okay, it's saying that the taxes need to be paid. Or making sure that it's a fourth quarter that needs to be paid.
Right.
You know, sometimes it will, it does have in there, you know, what their funding requirements are. Make sure they have a copy of the deed, make sure they have a copy of the closing funds, spousal deeds, what else is in there? Make sure if there's bills that are being paid.
How about this?
What?
UCC.
Ooh, no, Keisha, don't. Okay, screw it.
That's a whole
Okay, screw it. Let's talk about UCC, please.
Okay, you want to talk about it?
Let's open it up. Why not? I mean, I think Keisha, you're bad. But I think that's something that is happening current now, right?
Yes.
And for people that don't understand what UCC is, can you give us a little bit of explanation on what you guys mean by UCC, please?
So the UCC is a Uniform Commercial Code, right? That's what it, yes. So when you have solar on your home, and also when you have water softeners, the lender will file what is called a UCC on the property.
Correct.
Okay, basically states, hey, we have equipment on this property for a water softener, we have equipment on the property for a solar system. When that is on the property, in order for the property to go over to the buyer with solar, we have to do a transfer. Now, a lot of times the solar companies will not talk to the escrow company. They need the owner of the property to call in and tell them, look, I'm selling my property. Here's the buyer's name. They're going to call you and start the process to transfer solar.
Okay.
Okay.
In a perfect world.
In a perfect world. Well, and this is where I feel it's so important to educate the agents.
Yes.
Because they just say, oh, it'll be handled in escrow. But this is one of those things where the solar companies are like, no. You as the owner of this property has to call in and let us know that you're giving authorization because you're selling the property, for the buyer to call in, because there's certain information that the solar company is going to need from the buyer to be able to get them approved to assume the solar.
Right.
Okay. So in a perfect world, when the buyer calls, the solar lease agreement typically will get sent over to us. At that time, they'll let us know what the fees are for the transferring of the solar.
Okay.
They'll also send us a UCC termination for the current owner on the property. And then they'll file their UCC on the property once the buyer's name is showing on title to the property and stuff. So, but that's in a perfect world, you know, I mean.
So Keisha, since you brought up this point, let's talk about the escrow world. What really happens in those scenarios? And again, you know, we're talking about this not because we want to scare people.
Right.
We're talking about this because we want to educate you, because you guys get to see the fallout of not understanding what the process is like. We unfortunately get to see the agents not knowing what the process is, but yet you guys got to figure it out. You guys are like, you're escrow, you figure it out. All I want to do is come in and sign my docs, but they don't realize really the heartache.
Solar addendum.
Right?
Right.
So Keish, educate us.
I'm at a loss for words. I don't know anything about solar. No. So, in a perfect world, when the escrow is opened, when the contract is submitted, provide us with the solar addendum.
That simple?
Oh, that's huge.
Provide it when the escrow
All
is
the
open.
information on there is just, it's huge, Tess.
This way,
Please.
there's no miscommunication.
Okay.
I am aware
That there's a solar.
that there's solar
Right.
on the property before the prelim comes in, because guess what? It's not always recorded as a lien against the property.
What?
So we don't always know that there's solar involved in the transaction.
But Keisha, when I went to show the property, there was the damn solar panels on top of the roof and nobody knows about it.
Well, half the time, I mean, I actually never get to see the property.
Great
I
answer.
wouldn't know
That's
that.
true.
I
Great.
wouldn't know. So with that being said, if you provide us with the solar addendum, at least what I can do is help provide you with provide all parties with instruction on how to go about getting the solar transfer.
Okay.
Because a lot of people don't know.
Right. And Lorianne, I know you, I mean, we're joking around and everything, but you know, you said, please, it is important for agents, for you guys to send me the addendum when you open escrow. Don't send it to me once the prelim is put out. Don't send it to me 3 weeks out, because this could really
cause a delay.
Well, if we don't have the transfer forms in and we don't have the UCC termination, then we can't close. So that's going to hold up your closing. And we're very proactive.
Right.
And that goes for, you know, anything that we need in the transaction, trust documents, LLC, solar, like provide that to us all up front, or let us, you know, obtain that document from your client so that we can keep the escrow flowing smoothly.
Right, because let's be honest, at the end of the day, we all want to close the transaction. We all want to make sure that the transaction gets closed in a timely manner, that all of these scenarios, because I don't call them issues. They're issues once we don't know about them and then they pop up. That's an issue. If it's a scenario, we could handle it right away at the beginning of the transaction and say, hey, there's a solar panel. Okay, you guys put on your thinking caps and said, I got to make sure that all the parties know that we need this documentation to transfer the solar. If there's a water softening system, we need all of this documentation. If there's a trust, like you said, right? All of that has to be done up front, so you guys know how to set up your escrow for to go as smooth as possible.
I was gonna say that if you want a smooth escrow closing process, provide all documentation immediately.
Okay.
As soon as you have it, submit it to escrow.
Okay, so in a perfect world, that would happen. In the reality,
Yeah,
how often does it really happen? I mean, be honest.
not as much.
Not-
I mean, not as often.
Not
Right.
very
The
often.
thing is from the very beginning of opening escrow, if you give us your seller or your buyer's phone number and email address, we'll handle it.
Okay.
Like we have systems in place so that if we don't hear back from a client within a certain amount of time, that we're notified so that we can reach out to the client again and say, hey, are you still looking for your trust, and stuff. So it's very important that we get that stuff right away, because when those items come in, we have to submit them to title,
Right.
because we're not title, we're only escrow.
Right.
So the title side of it is the ones that has to review the documents that come in. Trust documents, LLC
And they give
documents.
us approval
Yes,
to proceed with what was provided.
yes.
Oh, so-
Or if they need additional documentation from what we provided.
Okay, so
So,
you guys don't have the final say on approving, certifications, trust, stuff like that. Title will always supersede that responsibility, because at the end of the day, whatever's in title, it's gonna either affect the transaction at the end of the transaction, or it's gonna go ahead and set up a potential problem for the future of that transaction. Is that correct?
yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So how come we always assume that escrow is the one that's holding everything up? Is it because we don't understand the process?
It's because we're at the forefront of the transaction.
Okay.
We're the middleman, I guess.
So again, you're the
You
ref.
know?
Nobody likes the ref.
We are the middleman.
Right.
So yeah, because all the communications are done through us.
Right.
So the documents are provided to us.
Okay.
And then we provide those to title, and then title comes back to us with everything's approved, looks good, these are your trustees, or this is who your managing member is, or title will come back and say, I need the articles, or these are the amended articles, I need the original articles, or, we need the death certificate. I mean, there's just so many things that are in play, and that's why it's so important to have an escrow officer that communicates.
Right.
Because when title's coming back to us, we're coming now to your clients. And when we go to your clients and then a lot of times your clients aren't coming to us, they're going to the agent.
Right.
And saying, title just called, or escrow just called and said they need this now from
Yes.
us, So we try and communicate everything with the agent along with their client, so that we're working together.
Correct.
To resolve or get whatever it is that we need.
Okay, so now let's talk about, the closing part, the closing table, right? You guys have loan docs, you set up the appointment with the buyer or the seller. How important is for all parties to be present in the time of execution of the loan docs, right? And the reason why I ask that is because we've gotten into a period of time that, especially after COVID, that like, send me, a DocuSign and I'll do it. But at the end of the day, it's really more important to have them present to be able to make sure that people understand what they're signing, especially when you're taking title in a buyer side and you want to put in your 14-year-old kid into the, add them to the deed, right? And I mean, I know you guys are shaking your head, but doesn't it happen? I mean, people don't understand that process or that part of the transaction that is crucial to make sure that everybody's going to be on the deed, understand their responsibilities on that signature, right?
Correct.
Keisha?
I think, well, a lot of lenders don't allow DocuSign. They do hybrid. That's been on the rise, where like the note and several other documents will be signed electronically.
Okay.
But the documents that are required to be notarized are signed in person in
Okay.
front of a notary. I prefer all parties to sign in person
Okay.
for that very reason, so that they can get educated and have the documents explained to them completely in its entirety. If not, it's just a lot of loopholes, like for clients. I had a client, for example, call me yesterday. We closed in December on his mortgage. He called me yesterday and he says, I was just calling, I wanted to see if there was any kind of way I could get an extension on my first mortgage payment.
Ooh, you don't want to do that.
I was like, well, you might want to call your lender.
Right.
However, that's not a good idea. Had he signed with me at the signing table, he would have never called me and asked me that.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, I totally get it.
I would have explained to him the importance of him making sure that he was in position to make that payment. There are also disclosures in the loan package that break down that default on the first payment or a default period.
Right.
Those documents should be explained.
Right. And Lorianne, I know you agree with what Keisha's saying, right? We must understand what we're getting ourselves into. We're signing a set of documents for a $500,000 loan over the next 30 years. We should not take it lightly of, just kind of show up and sign and be done with it, because we're assuming that we know what we don't know. Isn't that correct?
That's true. I mean, you think about it, this is their biggest purchase.
Yes.
And it's an exciting time. And I think because I've been doing this so long, I know what to tell them, after closing, what to expect, during closing, what forms are, like, hey, this is your note, this is the deed of trust, this gets recorded on your property. I think I'm a little bit more personable when I do my own signings and kind of explain things more from a personal level.
Right.
And I always tell them, because we've closed your transaction does not mean that you cannot call me.
Right.
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 And I think that's important for them to know that and to feel comfortable. Like, if I close 2 weeks from now, I get all this stuff in the mail and it looks like
official.
It's legit and official, and like it might be something, maybe I did something wrong, who knows, call me.
Right.
Because I can go through the documents with you. I've had several times where buyers have come in with a bag full of stuff that they've received from the recorder's office and just like, can you help me?
Right.
And just pointing out, because a lot of times after we close a transaction, your loan is sold to a new mortgager or a new servicer. So then you start getting those documents in and stuff. So, I think that we've both been doing this long enough that we're there after the transaction too.
Right. And again, it's important for us to talk about this because, there's nothing wrong with getting a notary. Let's be honest.
Right. Sometimes you have to.
Right. But if you have the opportunity, attend the closing, talk to the escrow officer. Sometimes the escrow officer might not have the time to sit there the whole period, but at least they're going to go over the most important documents that you need to know. Because, not understanding when your first payment is due and calling and saying, can I get an extension? That's not a good sign to begin with, because, the lender is going to have a really tough time on that one. And then second of all, right, you've never done this before. Let's be honest, 90% of the buyers, they're first-time buyers. They've never done this before. They're young buyers. And, it could be very intimidating. And I always say, because when I'm doing signings, I'm like, please ask any question that comes to your mind. Because, if you just sit there like a brand new chicken that you like, I'm just going to go ahead and just act however they want me to act. It's not the right thing, right? The biggest purchase of your life. And then understanding how the responsibilities of becoming a homeowner now with the mortgage company, with, the insurance. That's another thing that we see all the time where people call and say, hey, I thought my insurance was this company, but now it's this company. What's happening? So there's a lot of things that
we get escrow calls too after closing and stuff. And, having their agent and their lenders here when they're signing, it's like a sense of like calm for them.
Correct.
Because that way, hey, if I have a lender question, your lender's here to answer it. You know, if I have something with a contract or, you know, that then the agent's here. Now,
Right.
if the agent's not able to come and we have an issue or something comes up in the signing, we'll call the agent and we'll call the lender, you know.
Right.
We don't have an issue with it, but we feel that it's a sense of calm for the buyers and the sellers when the agents are present for their signings.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. Well, ladies, you guys are not going to believe these, but
What?
the hour is gone.
What? Oh my gosh.
No way.
You know how much more we have?
We haven't even
Hey,
scratched the surface, have we?
Wow.
You know what? This happens all the time. People are like, we're gonna talk for an hour. Like, dude, when we're talking what we know what we're talking about, time flies by. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time from your busy schedule. I know when you guys get back and you're gonna have 1,001 emails to go back to, but I really appreciate you guys taking the time explaining to not only the consumers but also the agents the importance of having a great escrow officer in your corner, somebody that has experience, somebody that understands. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time. Again, Miss Lorianne, if you want to go ahead and give me your name, phone number, how people could reach you, and then we'll go back to Keisha, please. Go ahead.
Sure, my name's Lorianne Dixon, and my phone number here at the office is 702-868-2338, and I also have my cell number on my business card. My cell number is 702-406-6039. If you have questions after hours and on the weekends, you can always text, call, or email me. I'm here to serve you. Thank you.
Perfect. Keisha?
Keisha Miller, my office or direct line is 702-680-6093, and you can call or text me on that number anytime. You can reach me.
Perfect. Well, my name is JC Castillo. I am the marketing rep for Lawyers Title. You guys could reach me outside of the air at 702-416-4302, 702-416-4302. And remember, Mr. Buyer, Mr. Seller, you guys have the right to choose your title company. All right, so if you guys really want great service, you guys want to deal with escrow officers at this caliber, make sure that you tell your agent, hey, I want to go to Lawyers Title, please. All right, because you know they're here. You just heard from them. And you know what? I think that we could make a series out of this because we just literally scratched the surface of what title and escrow is. So,
Yes.
you know, please stay tuned. We'll be here tomorrow. And I really appreciate you guys by tuning in. If you like it, give me a thumbs up. If you don't like it, let us know why. And we'll definitely adapt and change for what you guys are looking for. So thank you guys very much. And we'll see each other tomorrow.